Yo guys, what is up? My name is Grizzly, and today I'm gonna make another champion guide for Preseason 8. Today I'm gonna talk about top lane Vladimir. Now, I feel like top lane Vladimir has kinda gone under the radar recently. I've seen some pro players tweeting about him recently. They're saying that he's really strong top lane right now, that he's like a super strong lane bully and all that. And I honestly agree. I feel like Vladimir scales really well, but he also has a very decent laning phase. He can get abused in some matchups, but overall I feel like the champion is extremely strong. So on Vladimir you want to make sure that you take Flash and Teleport as your two summoners, at the start of the game at least. Then later on you could change them with Unsealed Spellbook, but I will not recommend that page and I will explain why later on into the video. As for the skill max order, obviously you max your ultimate first, and then you max Q into E into W. The reasoning for this is that Q is your most reliable spell. It both gives you the best trades in general because it doesn't cost HP unlike your E or W, and it's also on a relatively short cooldown, and it also heals you the more ranks you put into it, so it's overall the best spell to max. After that you max your E. It's your kind of second main damage ability, and it does a lot of damage in AoE. It's very good for wave clearing. The only problem is that it does cost a lot of health, so you want to make sure you use it very carefully, and you want to make sure that you do a lot of Qs, like off cooldown on creeps, and if you can get them onto your opponents, that's even better, but you have to sustain yourself with your Q to be able to use your E in trades, because it does damage yourself quite a lot. And then obviously W last, because the spell isn't really used for damage, it's mostly like an utility or an escape tool for Vladimir. It's good to stall for your cooldowns later on in fights, and later into the game Vladimir can use his combo, do a W into a Sonya's, and then he has all his abilities again, and then he's really hard to deal with later on, so that's the thought process behind the ability maxing. As for the items on Vladimir, for starting items I would mostly recommend Dark Seal and Refillable Potion. I feel like it's not the safest route, but it's most certainly like the highest value overall. But if you really think that you're gonna get harassed a lot and you won't get through laning phase before the first back, start Door and Shield, because with Door and Shield you basically can't get harassed out of lane, because that coupled with your Q sustain is like, it's so high, you won't be able to get poked down, or like it's even really hard to all in Vladimir or dive him because he has his W, so those are the best starting items in my opinion. And then for the core items, I would say you rush Hex Tech Protobelt like 99% of the time. I don't really see the cases where it's better to build something else. I feel like it's overall just the best item on him. It gives you HP, AP, CDR, and a really nice active, so overall it's just super good for Vlad. Then after Protobelt it's either Liandry's or Sonya's. Liandry's is the more, I would say, aggressive choice. It's if you don't think you need the survivability or the utility from Sonya's. With Liandry's you can do a lot of damage, especially to tanks. It's probably the best second item unless they have a really fed aggressive jungler. Then you probably want to build Sonya's to avoid getting killed by them, but overall I feel like Liandry's is better into tanks, but you build Sonya's into stuff that can kind of threaten you or maybe kill you. But either way, after you've finished one of those two as your second item, your third item should be the other one most of the time. And after these three like core items, you want to go into Void Staff and Rabadon's Death Cap most of the time. It's like the core damage items. Now if they don't build a lot of magic resist, you could go Luden's Echo instead of Void Staff, and if you need more MR for example, you could go into Spirit Visage, and those are basically like the main items on Vladimir. As for boots, CDR boots most of the time is the best option. It reduces the cooldown summoner as well, or I mean the cooldown of your summoner spells, which is really good for Vladimir. He's very like flash dependent to get like a flash EQ one shot on the AD carry later on, but you can also go sorcery shoes. Those are also really strong, especially in mid game, where you can basically like Vladimir always one-shot carries late into the game, but in the mid-game he might actually need Sorks to one-shot carries, so keep that in mind. And if you're against someone that doesn't really build that much MR actually, you can get to true damage with Liandry's and Sorks, so if you face someone that's not building any MR and disrespecting you, definitely go for Sorks and Liandry's, because you can basically deal true damage to them at that point. Okay, so as for the runes, I would recommend Aerie most of the time on Vladimir. I feel like it enables him to lane bully a lot harder than he usually would. Some people go Inspiration and Unsealed Spellbook. I feel like this is kind of the more cheesier option. It can be good. It's also like quite hard to know when you're gonna switch summoners and which summoner is the best at a certain point of the game. Overall, I feel like Aerie is a lot simpler, and it's also like higher impact early game. And I feel like as long as you survive the early lane phase with Vladimir, and even if you get an advantage, that's like super good because he scales so well anyways. So it's like, as long as you can win early game, I feel like that, your runes should accomplish that for you. And then after that, your kit in itself will carry you through the later game. So you basically go Aerie, and for the first row in the sorcery tree, you go Ultimate Hat because your ult CD is very important. It's a very strong spell. Obviously, you don't need Mana Flow Band because you don't have mana costs. And Nullifying Orb can be good against AP opponents, but Vladimir isn't that vulnerable to other AP champions top lane, so definitely go for the Ultimate Hat most of the time. As for the second row, you can either go Transcendence or Celerity. Celerity gives you move speed, which is quite good on Vlad. I knew before these changes it was quite common to go move speed quints on Vladimir, so you could definitely go for that. Or you could go for Transcendence to reach 40% CDR late game, so it's either like if you want to be more safe or more mobile, or you just want to scale better into the late game basically. So those are the two options. Most of the time I would go Transcendence, however, for the better scaling. The last row is quite straightforward. You basically want Scorch for early game poke. Gathering Storm can be really good later on if you get to like the 30-40 minute mark, because then you actually get like 80 AP at 40 minutes, so that's really strong. But overall, if you win early game with Vladimir, as I said before, you scale so well anyways, so basically take Scorch most of the time. As for your secondary tree, you want to go into Domination, and then you want to take Taste of Blood on the first row, and you want to take Ravenous Hunter on the last row in the left corner. These two basically gives Vlad even more sustain and healing, and it works really well with this kit overall. There aren't really any other choices here that are even remotely as good as these two, so just take these two and you will be fine. Okay, that's basically it for the setup on Vladimir. As for Vladimir as a champion later on, you just want to make sure that you farm a lot on the champion, because the champion doesn't have any CC in his kit per se, so I mean his W slows a bit, but that's about it. Otherwise, you want to rely on dealing a huge amount of damage and being very durable, so to achieve this you have to make sure that you have a lot of gold. Now this shouldn't be a problem, because your wave clear is super strong. You can basically one-shot waves with your E, and you can transition into pushing up side lanes to maybe flanking the enemy team, or if your team has like primary engage, you could even group and just get a really good fight off and end the game. But if your team is kind of behind and you lack primary engage, because obviously it's quite hard to engage with Vladimir reliably, just make sure that you farm side lanes over and over again and get really strong. As for the laning phase in itself, as I said, you just want to make sure that you Q-poke your opponent down to the ground basically, make sure that they back more than you because you have more sustain than them. Make sure that you take trades where you take damage and they take damage, so they have to back but you can sustain it up afterwards. That depends on the matchup of course though. So yeah, just overall I feel like Vladimir is an extremely strong top laner right now. I feel like he's very underrated. He currently sits at a 51.78% win ratio, so that's quite high, and also has a 4% pick rate, so he's picked like quite a bit, but he's not like one of the top 10 most popular top laners, and I feel like he should be because he's really strong early game and late game, so overall just a really strong champion in solo queue especially. So thanks a lot for watching this video guys, I hope you learned something. Make sure you subscribe, I'm getting really close to 500 subscribers, and when I achieve that milestone I want to make sure that I give something back to you guys, so I have something special planned. But anyways, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.